You wake up, it's the last day of the challenge, you have until midnight. The deadline looms. Hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and I am playing miniature golf. No, not that miniature golf. Dana Howl's Paint Your Minis golf, which will be explained by the link in the description to her video about that. Today, the 15th, is the last day, and I have a few more models that I want to crank out before tonight, and then tomorrow we can see how well I did.
So the last few models I want to paint today come from, as I'm sure nobody who watches my channel will be surprised, the Tanith First and Only. I've been painting a whole army of them, but I hate batch painting, and so I always end up with a bunch of models unpainted. I think I'll get started with this flamer, but I might bounce between a few of them in a small batch. And whilst I play the painting footage in the background here, I at least want to give some explanation to this challenge. It comes from the deep-seated drive to do away with the pile of shame, that being all the models you have bought and haven't painted yet. Except unpainted models are required if you want to actually paint models. Just like a carpenter will have a selection of wood and glue and screws, and a knitter will have an array of wool, needles and patterns, and a 3D print technician will have a headache. Having the supplies to carry out your hobby is a requirement to do that hobby. The issue arises when this gets out of hand, when you fall into the trap of buying all the new shiny things, but you end up seeing painting as a chore. Under that situation, your collection of supplies, those unpainted models, grows and grows, and it stops being a resource, and it starts being a stressor, which makes you feel terrible and stops you enjoying the hobby. And so, Backlog Golf is an excellent tool in your brain to help you keep that under control. As per the rules laid out by Dana Howl, I have kept track of everything I have painted, gifted, bought and painted. Every model you paint, also selling and giving away, earns you a -1 point. And every model you buy, 3D print or otherwise acquire, gives +1 point. And of course it's golf, and so the lower score is preferred. And a score of 0 means that you painted the same number that you bought and balance is maintained. But having a positive score shouldn't be seen as a failure, so long as you're buying resources for your hobby and not just being a corporate slave and buying everything.
Well, hopefully that explanation gives you the understanding of what all's going on. And in the meantime, I've finished off the Tanith First and Only models that I wanted to do. Not the whole army, of course, just the ones I was doing today. And because these ones were essentially speed painting and the quality of my Tanith First and Only is going down and down with every model, I think I've got just enough time to paint something a little more interesting. So it's over to the pile of opportunity up there and have a look and see what I can find. Poorly lit at the back of all of this are some interesting models. We've got the hassle-free Spec Ops team. We've got Warlord Games Judge Dredd vs Death. I don't think I can paint that in an hour. That deserves a lot longer. Purchased. That would be quick to paint, but I think I can do better. Well, up here are a few pots of things. We've got some Frostgrave, we've got some Stalker stuff, some Battle Sisters, some 3D printed things. Hello, Raz. Let's do Raz. That sounds fun.
So that little sequence I just showed is something I love to do. Whenever I have a spare few hours, or even a half hour, I go to my unpainted pile and just see what model takes my interest. And this is something I'd like to challenge you all at home to do. You don't have to film anything or even show off pictures when you're done. Just go through your unpainted stuff, pick out a single model, any model, that you really like the look of. It could be something small and simple or something elaborate, a grunt or a character or a vehicle. If you look at it and think, this will be cool to paint, then you paint it. Even if it's one from a squad, don't paint the rest of them, just that one. Throw consistency to the wind, because slight inconsistencies make for a much nicer army look, and also, isn't an inconsistent squad better than an unpainted one? Well, with Raz here, I printed him off on my terrible low-resolution printer, and it didn't come out very well, and so I dumped it on the pile and forgot about it. And it might have stayed there forever except for today. I looked at it, and I really wanted to paint it. Psychonauts is one of my favourite games, and I need to get the sequel at some point. Well, midnight approaches, and I did my best for little Raz, and within the hour, I got him done. The next morning, I set out every model that I've painted in the 92 days of the Golf Challenge. I've talked about the ghosts enough on this channel, so I'll show off everything else first as we tally it all up. There is, of course, Raz, the last model in the quarter. Quick and simple paint job. I might have done better, but it's still a low resolution 3D print, and I can only achieve so much with that. I also have these two other 3D printed characters from Stalker, another computer game series that I love and wanted some small models for. The red suit guy has a plastic head from an old kit, which is much easier to paint. These other two are from the Zona board game, which is also loosely related to the Strugatsky mythos. I just need some Annihilation models to complete the set. Oh wait, what about this from my collab with Miss Minilife? A tree from Annihilation. Changing track into Fantasyland, I painted this dwarf, and I actually gifted a second dwarf to Ratman, my co-host on Back to the Brush podcast, so I get an extra one there. Not pictured are two Sister of Battle models I gifted to my sister, who is starting that army. Moving through some historicals, I have these two Russians from Bad Squiddo Games, and these two may have gotten me into bolt action, which I'll mention again later in the video. Boudica here is almost certainly my favourite of this quarter. The freehand tartan is far from perfect, but it was such an enjoyable experiment to try out that technique. On the other hand, these ancient Britons from Airfix, not so much fun. The plastic they made from just makes paint behave weirdly, and no glue that I own would stick them to anything. But there are 10 of them, so that's a good score boost at least. More tiny models here, with a rabbit from Bad Squiddo Games, a 3D printed fairy, and an old squiggly beast from 40k's early days. Thankfully, size of model isn't a consideration, so these count as one each. The last of the tiny models are these epic scale commissars I painted as Gaunt. Now, I painted 5 of them for an upcoming video, and 4 of them are gifts, but this is the one that's staying with me. Unfortunately for me, only one of the gifts has actually been sent, so I only get to count 1 here. The others would be counted in the next quarter if I continue with this sort of thing. More 3D printed models here with the regimental dogs. I painted up this Drop Troops dog for the interview I had with the people behind the Drop Troop fan codex on Back to the Brush podcast, coming soon. And of course, I had to paint the Tanith dog. I just had to. Such a cool model, even off of my terrible printer. And that just leaves the 28mm Ghost models. And I won't show them all, but I will say there's 35 of them. Which means that over the 92 days of the challenge, just over 1 every 3 days. Now, that's a good way to paint an army, I think. Now, all of this only counts the models that I have painted, the negative scores, so I need to count all of the positives in the models that I acquired, bought, printed, and so on. Which didn't actually go all that badly. Starting off with a box of 10 cowboys. Now, I can't wait to build these, but I'm saving them for another Back to the Brush mini episode. I also, obviously, bought some models from Bad Squiddo, counting 5 here, and most of them I painted. And the 5 epic models were also bought during the 92 days, so they counted here too. 3D printing is the 2 dogs, and 2 more Wasteland models for my Stalker set. But that's the easy stuff. What about the stuff that's harder to count? For my Tanith First and Only, I've been buying and printing bits, parts, not necessarily complete models. The biggest batch is of just legs, so how do I count that? Well, there's enough torsos to make 4 models, and so I'll count the extra legs as if they were arms, I guess? But the biggest points loss is something that I might be able to wiggle my way out of. This is the Gaunt's Ghost Command Squad, released just before the quarter that this challenge takes place in. If I were to count it, I would be 6 models and a bonus 5 for it being a brand new release. But I was gifted the money for this by Just Make Stuff, and so I could count it as a gift. But also, I pre-ordered it just before the time of the challenge, and so even if it does count, it would count on the previous quarter if I'd have been playing this kind of challenge for multiple quarters. Either way, I think I'm good to not count it, and there's also 3 other models that I was gifted, a Tyrannid, an Arcoflagellant, and a Sister Repentia.
So that's my score for the last 3 months. Negative 45. Meaning that I've reduced my pile of opportunity, my pile of shame, my resources for my hobby by 45 models. Now I have plenty, and so that's not a bad thing. But in some cases, that might mean I would run out. I did note that I forgot to include the squad bonuses for some of this, but I did include it in the scoring. So that is factored in. My total should be 45, minus 45. I also noticed that quite a few of the models that I bought during this time are models that I painted during this time. Other than the cowboys that are being saved, that's really interesting that I'm buying models that I'm actually painting. But I'm also painting other models, stuff I've had for a while, and I think that balance is actually pretty healthy. I'm finding interest in the models that I have, but I'm also, when I'm buying new models, they are things I'm actually interested in as well. I'm painting, I'm enjoying painting, and it's a hobby, it's supposed to be enjoyable, and so I think I'm doing pretty well. And the models that I'm buying are ones I gravitate towards painting. Although I do have to say that the very day after the challenge ended, on the Thursday, I may have bought a bunch of bolt-action Russians. About 60 of them. So my next quarter will be very challenging indeed, and I really want to paint those Russians up because bolt action's a game I really want to look into. There's a local group that I can play with, but yeah, that's a lot of models. Those Soviet infantry are going to appear in quite a few videos coming up, and the only reason I can really afford to buy that kind of stuff is because of donations from my viewers. And so if you want to help me out as well, there's a donation link in the description. Some people have asked me about a Patreon, but I don't think there's nearly enough people interested in throwing me pennies for that to be worth my time. I've also mentioned the Back to the Brush podcast quite a few times during this video. My co-host Ratman and myself get up to all sorts of stuff, talking about model making, mini painting, and that kind of stuff. If you're interested in that, there'll be a link in the description to the podcast channel as well. Just something to put on for an hour or so while you're painting yourself. And I'm sure Dana Howl will be posting a video about the golf thing some point soon, so as soon as that goes up, I'll put that link next to the original video link. So if you follow those and check out what all this is about, and tell her that I sent you. So with the scores reset for the next quarter, and my score starting off at 60 something already, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.